Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to PitchZone, where we are going to talk about
finding your voice. Of course, finding your voice is a metaphor and it has so many different meanings to different people. So I am totally delighted to talk about this topic, finding your own voice and make it heard in a crowded marketplace together with 3 more coaches. Let me bring them in. Nathan, good morning to you to San Francisco. How are you today?
Doing fantastic. Happy to be here.
And your voice, you found it.
My voice? I found my voice for the moment. Yes, I'm really looking forward to the topic.
All right. Very cool. Very cool. And the next coach that we are going to bring in here is Susan Trumpler. Susan, welcome back again. How are you?
Claudio, it is so good to be here with you guys today. Thanks for inviting me again.
It's really, really cool. And you kind of started this format because originally PitchZone was meant to do reviews of pitches, startup founders coming in, giving a 3-minute pitch and then get a review. And once we didn't have a presenter, and that was your first appearance here, and we quickly just changed the format a little bit and said, you know what, let's do a top tips from the coaches session. And it really, really was quite popular. It's the most viewed live of all of the PitchZone videos so far. So Susan, always great to see you. And the next coach is Stuart Pink. Stuart, how are you today?
I'm great, Claudio. Nice to see you all. It's snowing here in Boston, which is a bit strange, but very pretty.
All right, all right. And of course, we have our viewers on YouTube. I see currently we have 6 people online. One of them is Fancy and Fleek, one of our previous presenters here. You may remember T-shirts. Faith-based T-shirts. If you are in the market for that, get in touch with Fancy and Fleek. And anybody else, if you want to quickly say hello in the chat, would be absolutely great. Here we go. Yes, Massimo, very, very loyal week in, week out. Massimo, it's so great to see you here. And yes, no snow in Thailand at all. We have Rick Pollack joining us from Boston. Rick will be one of the coaches next week again. Rick, I hope you're doing well and you are enjoying the snow that you have over there. And then Kirk Bogle, if you watched previous Pitch Zones, you may be familiar with him. He came through 3 times and did a spectacular job each time. And we have Scotty Spursum. Hello from San Francisco, our English language coach. It's so great to see you here online as well. And Scott Peak. Scott, it's a real pleasure have you here as well. And with that, I think let's just dive into the topic at hand. Finding your voice. It's a metaphor. And of course, I quickly want to say hello to Sam, because Sam was our first presenter, PitchZone episode number 1. Sam, it's so great to see you come back, and hopefully you'll get lots of value out of today's session. So yes, finding your voice, it's a metaphor, and any metaphor can go, into the very abstract or into the more literal understanding of it. So before we even get going here, let me ask each of the coaches, what does finding your voice mean to you? Nathan, let me start with you because you were the one that proposed this topic for today.
Yep. My response is that when you find that voice that allows you to transfer the enthusiasm that you have for whatever you're talking about to your audience, that's where I am going to concentrate on my comments today.
Excellent. And let me just go from left to right. Susan, what does it mean to you?
Alrighty. Well, everything that I think about comes through the lens of sales and marketing because that's what I do. I'm a sales coach. And so when I think about finding your voice, I really think about authenticity because people have become very savvy to our methodologies of promoting ourselves, and they will sniff out inauthenticity in a heartbeat. And so I'm always thinking about ways to be able to find the voice of my clients through what's truly authentic and what they bring into the world.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. This is exactly how I see it as well. It's that finding your identity, finding your uniqueness, because I absolutely believe we all have something inside of us that other people want. And too often in our marketing trained minds, we are drifting away from our own personal self. So this will be very, very interesting, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts about this, Susan. And finally, Stuart. Stuart, what does it mean to you?
Well, I can already tell I'm going to love this discussion because I love everything that's been said so far. But finding your voice, to me, it takes me in two very different directions. One direction is very much that identity that you just referred to, thinking about who you are as a person, who your what experiences you've had, and then what the stories in your life are, and then thinking about your message that you want to take out into the world, which might just be a passion or it might be a job that you do. So that's one side, your whole identity. But then getting a lot more literal, your voice is a tool that you are using to communicate. And so I like to think about, well, how are you using that voice? How can you improve that voice when you're communicating? So there are two different directions that I'd like to go in today.
I absolutely love this because on one side we do have more abstract interpretations, Nathan, Susan, and on the other side more on the literal side, right? So who wants to start out with answering one question, and that is, how do you find your own voice?
Oh, can I start, guys? Do you mind? All right. So, Claudio, you said something that in just your recap that really sparked interest for me, and it's about identity. Because I think that your identity, who you are, who you present yourself to the world as being, is a huge part of finding your voice. And sometimes you are in an identity crisis. And so, in essence, when you say you have to find your voice, it literally starts with understanding your identity and being secure in who you are and who you're presenting yourself with. And so there's always, there's so much out there around subconscious and primal brain and, your amygdala and your emotional side. There's so much out there. I know if I talk about this, your audience will be fairly familiar with it, but there is this cognitive dissonance that's going on in your brain at all times where the logical part of you and your identity literally is confident and secure and can project the identity through your voice without any problem. But then there's that little part of your brain that's going, no, it's not safe out there. Don't say that. Don't talk like that. People will judge you. And that's the conflict that I think really diminishes your voice and really it creates that loss of true value that you bring in your communications. So a little bit of a rant there.
Well, it's funny, Susan, that you say that because that reminds me of an experience I had very early on when I was speaking, which is that as a person, I'm quite introverted and quite quiet, but on stage, I'm not afraid. And sometimes I would start speaking and I'd hear my voice and think, wow, who's he? He sounds confident. And then I'd realize, oh, that's me. That's my voice. And so I very much grew into the confidence that my voice had. And I think that's a technique that anyone can practice. Practice speaking boldly, clearly, confidently, and then start to own it, start to feel less of an imposter. And actually, that is your voice. But I wanted to say one more thing about the identity, because I love this. And it's a way you can improve your speaking, but also find out more about yourself. Anyone can take a piece of paper and think about their identity and write down all the different identities that you have, all the different parts of you. And then what's interesting is you can see where you maybe stand out from other people, and that might be either a focus for what you're speaking about, or it might be something that you can tap into to help what you're speaking about. So, for example, a big part of my identity is that I'm English and I speak English with a British accent. And for all the years that I lived in England, that didn't mean anything to me. But on coming to America, and I've lived a total of about 14 years here now, it became a much more significant part of my identity. And so it's something I can use. It's also something I have to be aware of, because there might be words I use or phrases that get blank looks from people, including my family sometimes. So it's something I'm thinking about, but it's very relevant to my voice.
And in my coaching experience, I have found a fair number of people that tell me I don't like my voice. And that's a pretty important statement, because if you don't like your voice, then finding the voice that we're talking about here is probably one of the most important things I recommend you start experimenting with. As Susan and Stuart have mentioned, it's a time to experiment with different voices in different situations. And that's kind of the rub, is you just can't walk down the street. I mean, you could just walk down the street and start playing with your voice, but you're not getting any feedback or responses or coaching. So if you don't like your voice, or if you want to experiment with your voice in different situations, there's places to do that. You could join a Toastmasters club, perhaps, or maybe go to an improv class where they give you lots of opportunity to experiment with your voice, so you become much more comfortable with your voice in your body and the sound of it. Improv probably is one of the quickest ways to help you find that voice of enthusiasm that you feel comfortable using with people in real life situations.
Can I just jump in quickly on that? Because one of the most common experiences that just about everyone goes through is when they listen to themselves recorded, and it's horrifying. And the reason it's horrifying, well, a couple of reasons. One is you're not used to it, but the second is, of course, that your own voice sounds different to you than it does to every other person in the world, because your own voice doesn't just travel through the air to your ears, it travels through your body. So we all have these beautiful, deep, resonant voices, and it's a tragedy that no one else can actually hear my real voice. But the way to get around the fear or the thinking it sounds awful is, of course, every other person on earth has already accepted your voice as it sounds. That's the only voice they know for you. So it's just a bit of educating yourself that actually your voice is fine. And then if you do happen to listen to yourself recorded, the more you listen to it, the more you get used to it. And after that, it's not a problem anymore.
Oh, I don't know. I hate my voice. And I get a lot of, I've never gotten over it. I can't stand listening to my podcast. I don't like listening to videos, but I get a lot of compliments on my voice. I'm told, and Claudio has said this to me, it's a voice that's soothing and resonate. I think it's, it comes from the right part of my anatomy, I guess is the way you put it. But that's a coaching voice, right? So I use that voice, or I use my natural voice when I'm coaching, and it really fits the situation perfectly. But when I'm presenting, if I'm on stage or if I'm facilitating in a large room of people, I have to project more. It feels unnatural. And yet it is, I have to recognize, in essence, what voice to use at what time and get comfortable with it.
And when you're in public, do you mind if I ask you a couple questions here? When
Oh,
you're
of
in
course.
public
Oh,
and you switch into that voice, that projection voice, are you typically mic'd up or not?
I have to be mic'd up
Okay.
because people cannot hear me. So
Okay.
yeah.
So if you're mic'd up, then my question to you would be, why do you feel like you have to project when you have the microphone to do the work for you?
Because
Maybe
if
you're switching into a different.
I was just going to
Go
say,
ahead.
you're really making a good point here, because my natural voice is good for intimate coaching, creating a small space that people feel safe in. And I
Mhm.
don't think that natural voice is what's appropriate when you are in a room full of people that you are talking about something you're passionate about. You want to convey, a conviction, and it doesn't
Right.
feel like it's the right voice to use.
In your mind, right?
In my mind, of course.
Yeah. So my recommendation would be to validate that, try one
Mhm.
time in a small situation and go into that voice that you use when you're coaching, and don't go into that, that other voice that you think you need to use, and then go around the room afterwards and check in with some people and ask them how they felt.
Mhm.
And you might be surprised. You might be going into a voice that you don't. I'm sorry, we're coaching each other here, but you might not. This is just what I would tell a client. You
No,
might
I love
not
it.
need to jump into that projection voice because it's not you, and you don't like the way you sound,
Mhm. Thank you.
right?
That's really good. Hey, I love that comment from Sam Gets Fit around your voice changing when you're sitting or standing. I really notice, I have a stand-up desk, and I really notice a huge difference in my voice and the voice quality when I'm standing versus sitting. I should be standing now.
Oh, there's no
Well, I
question
think
about that. Go ahead, Stuart.
there's an, there's another really interesting point here, which is, of course, we're talking about voice as in singular, as if there's just one voice. But actually,
Mhm.
once you find what we might call your default voice, the voice which you're most comfortable most of the time speaking at, it's really necessary for everyone to think about how they can change it when they're speaking, because of course if you're the same the whole time, it doesn't matter how good or how natural
Mhm. Mhm.
your normal default voice is, it will end up being a bit boring. And that's why we do emphasize things. We do find places where we can speak more loudly or more softly. We can pick up the pace of things. And sometimes if we're storytelling, we might even be able to act the role of other people, which allows for a dramatic voice change, much like Claudio did at the beginning of this broadcast. But so I think that's one of the fascinating things, is the better you know your natural default voice, the more you can then think, okay, how can I actually now start to change this up? And that's not something I used to think about at all. It's only in the last 10 years or so that I've looked for opportunities to do that. So we have lots of voices in our arsenal in the end.
Very good comment, and I like this statement here by Sam as well, because your posture makes such a big, big difference. And the reason why it makes such a big difference is that you are changing your breathing, and it's all linked together. Your posture, your breathing, and typically when we are a little bit anxious, excited, we are starting to tense up a little bit. And
Yes.
when we tense up, we just don't breathe as well, as deeply anymore. And what happens is also your voice is starting to come from a higher area in your body, right? So try this at home, and just sit there and go like, this is my nose. And when I speak through my nose, people will not like it. And then go a little bit further down to your throat, and then start to speak from your throat and notice the difference. But then start to pull it down, further down into your chest until you find your chest resonating whenever you're speaking a vowel. And that's typically the most pleasant voice for other people. That's where Susan is speaking from, that makes her voice so tremendously soothing, at least to my ear.
All
You
right.
know,
I
there
like the
is.
way you go ahead.
Go ahead, Susan. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I like the way you talked about the physical posture making a difference. I still want to talk a little bit more about how your mental posture, in essence, in essence, that moment when your mind becomes distracted, like you're thinking or thinking too much about what you are going to say, and there's distraction in your head, and you lose your voice, you lose the confidence in your voice. From the 3 of years experience as presentation coaches, how do you work with people to eliminate the distractions if possible, if not work through that so it doesn't affect your voice?
Yeah, and while you are here in the focus, Susan, I brought up a comment that Massimo made about how amused he is knowing that you don't like your own voice.
No one likes their own voice. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
All right, all right.
Well,
Now we've been talking a lot about the more literal interpretation right now of the actual voice that comes across and people bring or hear. Nathan was talking about a little bit more of an abstract interpretation in terms of transferring your enthusiasm, being able to transfer your essence. Nathan, can you elaborate on that a bit?
Sure thing. Well, so long as you don't start with a Red Bull, what I'm talking about is we all know that enthusiasm is contagious. We want to be around people that are enthusiastic, especially genuine, not the disingenuous, as Susan mentioned earlier. We can spot disingenuous enthusiasm in a heartbeat. But being able to transfer how you feel to your audience is what I'm talking about here. And by using your body, of course, and your face is a big part of everything happening, and the words that you say. On top of that, I'm very, very cognizant about the fact that your voice is what's being used, or the mechanism to transfer how you feel to your audience. And if you just
Mhm.
stand there and tell people what you want to say by just saying it in basically the same kind of tone voice without a whole lot of vocal variations in the way you're speaking, and the only thing moving on your face is your lips, that's one way to present, of course, but that's not how you transfer to people how you feel, is it?
Mhm.
Yet in a lot of presentations, people do that. They fall into that, oh, I got to be more professional and put on my presentation face. But then it's like you're not the real person like you really are. So when you're genuine and you push it just a little bit more in a presentation to just make sure that everybody in the room, whether it's in person or virtual, is like leaning forward. They can't take their eyes and ears off of you. Frequently, if you just have what Stuart was saying a moment ago, variations in the way you use your voice and how you emphasize a word or de-emphasize a word, or go into a storytelling voice or into all the different, there's multiple voices that I use unconsciously, but I use them, well, it's not unconscious. I use them on purpose because I know that the variations that we use when we're speaking is part of what keeps people engaged. So I know that was a bit of a rant, but if you don't like your voice, there are speech coaches out there, or you can just go to the local university and knock on the linguistic door and walk in and say, "Hey, any chance I can get 10 minutes of your time here?" And they'll say, "Well, who are you?" Of course, they'll either say, "Come on back when I have office hours," or they'll sit you right down and talk to you. This is something you can work on. If you don't really like your voice, or you feel like you want to work on it and learn how to use that amazing music box, as Scotty often says, just find some help and experiment.
Well,
Go ahead, Stuart.
I really love everything that you just said, Nathan, because in the process of finding my voice as a speaker, I realized my natural speaking voice is a very enthusiastic one. And I didn't know that about myself, but I look at myself compared to other people and think, yeah, I have energy and enthusiasm. I guess that's who I am. But there's a very interesting way you can experiment with this, which is that if you have ever been around young kids, you can totally change their mood according to what you do. So you can take a toddler and you can make them laugh by being silly or dramatic. And similarly, I've taught classrooms of second grade, third grade kids. You can completely change the mood of a classroom according to what you do. And so that's great fun to do. But guess what? Professional adult audiences are exactly the same. And it's just realizing you have that power on stage, and that power is well worth using. Sometimes you want to bring the energy up in a room. There are other times as well where your voice needs to be consistent with your message. So if you are trying to persuade people that something is really important and really matters to you, and you sound completely bored, they're not going to think that it does matter to you. You've got to be enthusiastic in that situation. But of course, then what audiences do, what people do, it's human nature, is they reflect back that same energy. And so it really is a win-win. And like, experiment when you can with any people, because you'll find that it works, and then you just get used to it on stage.
Brilliant, excellent, excellent. Scotty had a comment on YouTube that I want to bring up here, because this is another big aspect of finding your own voice, and that is to figuring out how to say what you really, really mean, right? Because so often incongruence is what leads to conflict. If you say something, but the other person doesn't perceive it the way that you really, really mean it, right? And it's up to you as a communicator to make sure that the other person really, really understands what you mean, right? So I always say the purpose of your communication is the response you get. And if you don't get a response, if you don't get the right response, well, then change your approach slightly and try again until the meaning is actually coming through. What do the other coaches think here?
I agree 100%. If you don't get the response from your audience that you want, you got to change something. And the first place to start is look inside, look in the mirror, listen to what you've said, record the meeting, play it back, watch yourself, turn the sound off and watch yourself. Are you just standing there like a robot just talking, or are you actually communicating visually? And that will give you some clues as to perhaps how to amplify what you're doing with your audiences. I don't love to watch myself on video, but I love to watch myself so I can improve and watch what I like that I did and what I don't like that I did. And that's how I fine tune what I do on stage, especially in this virtual world. I mean, I'm recording literally everything these days.
That's exactly it. This is so profound because we are recording so much. Today, it's the year 2023, and we probably see ourselves in action 100 times more than we did in 2013, 10 years ago, because the only time then was in front of the mirror, right? And I do want to pick up on the difference here, though, between real life situations and online. A lot of people, they report that it's extremely difficult to make a deep connection online. They report it's so difficult to read the room, and all of that, of course, plays a role into communicating authentically. So I want to spend the next 10 minutes that we have left on the clock, talk a little bit about how and what do you change when you present online, when you meet online, to still get your own authentic voice through. And I know, Susan, you probably have some real interesting thoughts on that.
Well, I do. Thank you so much. Here's the thing. I think it's easier sometimes to connect online than it is in person because it is all about eye contact and about leaning in and really connecting with the person that you are, in essence, communicating with. The one thing I won't do, or I really try as hard as possible, is to use a webinar type of effect where I cannot see people's faces. It drives me crazy. And so when I'm on a Zoom situation, I am always honing in and even pinning people so that I can look directly at one person. And I sometimes I feel that's the secret to online communication is pick one person and really hone in and talk to that person. Everyone will think you're talking to them, but it becomes it's a very intimate way to communicate, and it's hard to do that when you're actually standing in a public situation in a large room where sometimes you can't even see the people in your audience. So I love online communication. I have no problem with it.
Excellent, excellent. Nathan.
Yeah, the thing you just said, Susan, about just reminded me of, I do this without even thinking about it. So thank you for bringing this up. I do the same thing when I have, 10, 12, 15, or even 49 people on a screen. I'll grab the one person who's got their camera on, that's animated, that's smiling, that's nodding, and I'll pin them in the top left corner right near my camera. And that way my peripheral vision is picking up on that particular person at that moment to help. But you're right. If you don't look into your camera, then you're not making eye contact with your virtual audience or the people that are watching you in the recording. And that's probably one of the most misunderstood things in the virtual world is you cannot look at your screen to make eye contact with the people you're looking at. It don't work. There's no camera in the middle of the screen or in their eyeballs when you look around. One day, maybe that'll happen. But for today, the key is to take a lesson from television. Talk show hosts have two audiences, right? They have the in-studio audience and they have the bigger audience, which is the home audience and the people that watch the program after it's been recorded. If you want to make eye contact with everybody in person, it's impossible. You cannot do that. But in the virtual world, it's actually really easy. When you're speaking, look into the camera. And if you need to pick up a clue over here on the screen because Claudio is shaking his head or he's looking around waiting for me to stop talking, you pick up that clue and come back to the camera when you want to talk to the people at home. It takes a while to trust that you can do it. But when you look into that camera, like most of us are doing today with all of you watching, doesn't it look like I'm speaking directly to you? I hope so.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I have to confess, I prefer speaking live to a live audience in person rather than being online. But I also think there is a lot of overlap. Like, for example, Nathan's tip just then to find that person who's smiling and energetic online. Well, the same can work with an in-person audience. Of find the friendly faces in the room and make sure that you're using their energy and directing. You're talking to them. I think another general tip about speaking is that whilst you may have a large audience, as much as possible, you want to be speaking to each person as if they are individuals and allow them to feel that. And of course, that does work well online because everyone is in their own room, in their own space. And we talk about being authentic. One thing that you get with online speaking is it's almost like you start by inviting your audience into your room, into your own personal space. They learn a little bit about you just by looking behind you and around you and seeing what you have to share. So that there are definite advantages of both ways of presenting. I like the fact as well that you can have comments here. You can in real time see what people are thinking. You can take questions. You can answer questions so you can really personalize the experience online in a way that might be difficult in front of a big in-person audience. But I think, as ever, take the good from one and then see if you can transfer it across to the other, and keep improving both forms.
Very interesting comments. And the speaking to one person only is actually something I had to train myself very, very hard to do online, because I come from the real life environment where you are presenting in a room, and of course you only make eye contact with one person. So very often I would use sentences like, and you all can think about this or that, right? And online I had to train myself to skip that all, to talk to all, and basically just say, and as you can see, blah, 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 blah. So it's really, your language can make a huge, huge difference as well. I just saw Ira Alkiros came in, and thank you so much, Ira, for this compliment. We do our best to help, and please, whenever you are ready, Ira, come on into PitchZone, the pitch review part, and we'll do our best to make sure that your next pitch is coming from your heart as well. All right, so that leaves one thing that I want to bring up when it comes to transferring enthusiasm and developing and finding your voice, and that is the use of adjectives. If you've ever attended a course of mine, you know I am big on adjectives, and they can make a huge, huge difference in how enthusiastic you appear and making that part of your voice. Steve Jobs, for example, he was a master of using adjectives, and he even created some that became part of his identity. Some, like for example, insanely great. If you hear somewhere insanely great, you immediately think of Steve Jobs. Now, of course, you may not have the same clout, but nevertheless, you can own specific words and make them part of your identity, make them part of your voice. All right, we have about another 3 minutes or so before I'm going to announce something really, really exciting. So how about we just go through the coaches again? Nathan, do you want to have one last comment on finding your voice?
Yes, indeed. I'd like to take it to the point now where, let's assume you've found your voice, or you're working on finding your voice. The next thing to consider is, in the virtual world especially, check the microphone you're using. If you have a crappy microphone, that means your voice is not coming across as crystal clear as it possibly could if you had a better microphone. I'm not talking about spending hundreds and hundreds or thousands of dollars, but I encourage everybody to, if you're working with that little pinhole in your PCs that has a microphone somewhere in there, your voice is not what it could be. In the Mac world, those little pinhole mics, they work beautifully. But if you want to simply get a better experience and have more engagement with your audience, go to Amazon, find a microphone that plugs into your USB port, no matter what computer you're using, and experiment with it. You can get a little lapel mic that plugs straight into the USB port, and you can just amplify your voice even more. And sounding like you're almost on the radio in the internet world is not hard to do anymore. So that would be my last comment. Check your microphone.
All righty. I'm going to go inside. Own your message. It is all the techniques, all of the things that we talk about, even down to the microphones. If you don't feel confident and secure and completely passionate about the message that you're sharing, it's going to have a really hard time landing with your people. So go inside first, make sure that you own your message, and then work on everything else that brings it out of you properly.
Excellent, excellent. And Stuart?
I love that so much, Susan. I totally agree. I just want to really answer a question I'm not sure we answered earlier that Susan had about what do you do when that confidence is speaking to you and affecting what you're saying. And I think my answer to that would be lower the stakes here. You have this important message that you're communicating. Remember, it doesn't need to be perfect. When we're speaking normally, the words don't come out perfectly. And so just when you realize that, as long as you're getting your message across, that's all that matters. And of course, if you're not perfect, then you're more authentic, which also just benefits the whole message that you're trying to get across. So I hope that answers that a little bit.
Excellent.
Absolutely great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much to all of the coaches, of course, here today. I think we uncovered a couple of gems that I can tell from the comments in the YouTube comment section that we hit the nail on its head here today. And yes, so what am I gonna announce? Well, before I get to that, you know, it's gonna be a course on curiosity. No. But before I do that, I want to bring out our little doggy here quickly again, because I see we have a couple of people here joining us online. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so, because we do this every week and I have a lot of things that I'm going to post on YouTube in the next couple of weeks and months. So you don't want to miss out on that. So click on subscribe and get notifications as well. And that way you're not going to miss out anything. Now, what do I have in store? Something really, really exciting. It is a 5-day online pitch challenge. So all founders, and this is specifically targeted for founders. So we just talked about the difference between presenting online, pitching online, and in the real world. And the thing that I see most people struggling with right now is to make that emotional connection with the audience and make it fun and have even more impact. At the very, very beginning, Susan said, I think sometimes it's easier to make a deep emotional connection. And I agree with that. I have learned to do that, and now I want to share this with you. So go to sennhauser.com/OPC and register for the upcoming online pitch challenge. It's going to take place on February 4 to the 8th, and it's only for 32 founders, startup founders, only 32. So you may want to get your name on the list as soon as you click on the link to make sure that you secure your spot. And with that, we are at the end of today's program. Again, many, many, many thanks to the coaches. Many thanks to everybody who joined us here today live. We actually had a little record here. At the peak, we had 12 people live online. This makes me very, very happy to get into the double digits. And we just keep on going and improving. So again, thanks to all of the coaches, and we shall see each other again next week. And because this was so much fun here today, we are going to do the same thing next week. Just a different topic, no pitch review, and then the following week, we might get back to the pitch reviews. And with that, I wish you all a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and I hope to see you in the online pitch challenge as well. See you. Bye-bye.